Okay, so you caught the news right. April 2025 U.S. tariffs were suddenly back in the spotlight. It initially looked like these really broad reciprocal tariffs were hitting almost everything.
That's right, yeah. A very, very rapid escalation for a short while there. And reciprocal tariffs, just quickly, are basically when one country hits back with tariffs because another country put tariffs on them.
Gotcha. But then here's the interesting part. Smartphones and computers got this surprise exemption. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack, why that happened, what it actually means for you, the tech user, and maybe what's coming next.
Yeah, and we've been digging into official reports, analyses, news articles, trying to piece it all together.
Exactly. The mission is really just to cut through the noise and figure out what's essential here because things were moving fast.
Extremely fast. So where should we start? That timeline.
Yeah, let's do the tariff roller coaster. Because before this exemption, things escalated incredibly quickly. First, there was already that 20% tariff on all Chinese goods related to fentanyl.
Right, that was kind of the baseline starting point.
Then, boom, April 2nd, it jumps to 54% with these new reciprocal tariffs.
Okay.
Just 6 days later, April 8th, we're talking 104%.
Wow.
And then the next day, April 9th, it's a minimum of 145% on a lot of Chinese goods. Plus, there was still that baseline 10% tariff on goods from most other countries, too.
That sounds incredibly unstable for businesses trying to, plan anything.
Totally chaotic, I imagine. Huge uncertainty.
Absolutely. Planning cycles just went out the window, especially for U.S.-China trade.
Okay, so then, seemingly out of nowhere, around April 11th or maybe the 12th, Customs and Border Protection puts out a notice. Smartphones and computers exempt from those big reciprocal tariffs.
And it's fascinating just how broad that exemption list was. Not just the finished phones and laptops, but like a ton of other electronics and crucially components.
Like what?
Well, semiconductors, those vital little chips, right? Solar cells, memory cards, disk drives, monitors, routers, even the equipment needed to make semiconductors. It was pretty extensive.
And get this, it was retroactive to April 5th.
Right. Which likely meant some importers could actually get money back. But the clarity didn't last long, did it?
No, because then we started hearing kind of conflicting things from President Trump and other officials about whether this was permanent or what exactly.
Exactly. So the million-dollar question, why the sudden U-turn?
Yeah.
Well, the information points to a few big things. One major factor seems to have been the fear of really significant price hikes for American consumers on essential tech.
Oh, yeah. Imagine a 145% tariff on your next phone. Yikes.
Yeah, definitely hold on to your old one. And then there was apparently some pretty intense lobbying from major U.S. tech companies. Apple was mentioned specifically.
Okay. What was their argument?
Basically, that these tariffs could really hurt American competitiveness by making key components way too expensive, stifling innovation. There was even talk it could hinder the whole AI revolution.
Ah, right. Plus the strategic side not wanting to be too dependent on China for critical tech.
Precisely. And sources even noted President Trump commented about, quote, helping Apple's CEO, Tim Cook.
Interesting detail. So how did the market react? Tech companies must have been relieved.
Oh, absolutely. Immediate positive reaction. You saw stock gains for companies like Apple, Dell, Nvidia, Microsoft. But, and this is a big but, the sense is that this relief is probably temporary. There are already pretty clear signals about sector-specific tariffs coming, focused on semiconductors, possibly within a month or two.
So hitting the components instead of the finished goods.
Seems to be the plan. And these markets are just so deeply tied into global supply chains and, yes, Chinese manufacturing.
Okay, so temporary relief for consumers and some companies, but maybe more targeted pain later. How did China respond to the exemption?
They called it a small step. Basically acknowledging it, but saying they want all the reciprocal tariffs gone. And you have to remember, China also has high tariffs on U.S. goods, I think around 125%, so tensions are still high.
So it's not necessarily a sign of things cooling down overall?
It's really unclear. Could be tactical, could be a small concession. China also warned they might retaliate, maybe with export controls on things like rare earths, if those semiconductor tariffs happen.
Okay, so definitely still a tense situation.
Yeah.
And were there criticisms of how this whole exemption rollout happened?
Oh, definitely. Lots of criticism about inconsistent policy from the administration. The conflicting statements caused a lot of confusion. Even President Trump seemed to deny the exemptions at one point.
Right.
And yeah, the big worry remains that this is just temporary with those semiconductor tariffs looming. Plus the broader concern about the whole trade conflict maybe damaging the U.S. economy or even contributing to a global slowdown.
So just to be crystal clear, even with these exemptions for phones and computers, they aren't totally tariff-free.
Correct. That's crucial. The original 20% fentanyl-related tariff on all Chinese goods, that apparently still applies.
Yeah.
Even to smartphones and computers.
Okay, so there's still that layer.
Yes. And then we have the planned semiconductor tariffs coming, which could hit a huge range of products indirectly. Other things like solar panels and flash drives were also exempted from the big reciprocal tariffs, it seems. There's a whole detailed list using those HTSUS classification codes.
Got it. So looking ahead, it really feels like semiconductors are the next big flashpoint. Commerce Secretary Lutnick said probably a month or two.
That seems to be the timeline, yeah. And there's talk of potential future tariffs, maybe on pharmaceuticals, maybe automobiles down the line, plus ongoing national security reviews of the whole electronics supply chain.
And the big backdrop is always U.S.-China trade talks, or lack thereof, and this push for companies to reshore to bring manufacturing back.
Exactly. The future is still really uncertain, but the focus seems to be shifting towards these critical components and trying to, let's say, strategically adjust supply chains.
Okay, so summing it up, the smartphone and computer tariff exemption, it feels like a temporary breather in a much larger, ongoing, and still pretty tense trade story.
A temporary fix, yeah.
So while maybe you, listening, won't see a massive price spike on your next phone right away, these underlying issues, especially potential tariffs on key components like semiconductors, could definitely still have ripple effects.
For sure. The downstream impact is the thing to watch.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Given this temporary measure and this laser focus shifting to semiconductors, what do you think the real long-term strategy is? Is it purely national security? Is it economic leverage? Or maybe something else driving all this? Definitely something to chew on.